Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome into the podcast. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about how to develop a more strict standard, how to become more rigid in how you approach the standards and rules of your relationship, but without becoming unreasonable in the process.
But before we get to all of that, don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, when you subscribe, it makes me smile.
And if you want to support the channel even further, a link to how to do that is in the description box, either through YouTube memberships or our Patreon page. So definitely check it out if you are interested.
Absolutely.
So we have been on this journey in our relationship recently where we are kind of becoming a little bit more strict with how we approach the rules and standards of our relationship and how strictly those are held. And so we thought it would be a really good conversation to talk about kind of our journey through that process and how you can approach the rules and approach the standards in a more strict way, becoming more rigid with what is and is not acceptable, but without becoming unreasonable. And I think what I mean by unreasonable when I use that word is not setting a standard and not upholding a standard in a way that is unrealistic for your take it in hand and your stage of your relationship. We've been talking a lot about how our rules are set up and how we have approached upholding the standards in our relationship up to this point, because I think that to a certain extent we've started to outgrow some of the systems and some of the ways we were approaching things in the past.
Yeah, it's just like anything. There's always points in life where you want to really take a look and reevaluate, a way you're doing anything. And maybe there's a point where you go, there's something that's just not quite getting to where we need it to go. And is that a lack of preparation? Is that a lack of discipline? Is that what is causing that to happen? And so one of the things that we've been doing is we really decided to kind of go through with a fine-tooth comb, if you will, through everything that we were doing and really try to structure every aspect of our relationship, as she was saying, from the rules and how we delve out punishment with those rules. And we just went through very specifically and got very, very detailed with it because we felt like there wasn't enough detail in certain areas. And it was leaving a lot of things where you just kind of threw it up in the air and then you thought, well, we'll just see what comes down after that. And so that is where we really decided, okay, we even need to be more specific and more detailed oriented in every aspect of our relationship, because it's those little things that in just a few areas were just causing an irritation. Would that be a good word to use? Probably.
I would agree. I would agree with the assessment that we were starting to get to a point of irritation, and not necessarily Coda being irritated at me, but more of just both of us not having a sense of peace or a sense of ease in our relationship. And it was almost like some of the systems that we were using were becoming a hindrance to the progress that we wanted to make. And so we decided to sit down and really go through everything, like Coda was saying, and really look at what are the expectations and what does that really mean for us. And once we did that, we realized that the only way to really uphold these expectations is for consistency to come into play and for punishments to really support that growth. And in order for the punishments to support that growth, they needed to become more serious. And they needed to actually do their job to act as a deterrent. I think that that's something that we have really been on a journey with in our own relationship. And I feel like you can look at past podcasts and see we've talked a lot about our punishment systems. We've talked a lot about how we have approached punishments. And you can see that growth if you just go back and listen to those podcasts from where we were, a year ago, a year and a half ago.
Come a long way.
We have. And this is just kind of the next evolution in that process to say, okay, here's how we are going to approach punishment. It is going to be more strict. It is going to be more rigid, but it's going to serve our relationship better. And in order for it to serve our relationship better, we do need to be a lot more strict and a lot more rigid on what constitutes a punishment, what the rules actually mean to our relationship, and what the structures mean to our relationship.
Really what this is, we've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but putting more of parameters in what we're doing. In order to take our relationship to the next level, we realize, no, we need to make more detailed decisions and more deliberate decisions in things, as she was saying, just like the punishments and the rules, and really even coming down to, we've never actually defined whether or not in one area if I should actually do this or not. It's kind of been one of those up in the air things that that Aria's had to ask about. And I've never really defined, no, every time I want you to do that. There was never really a clear direction on some of the things that we wanted to do. And so we realized that was what was really, really important, is getting all of those details in order so that we could feel like, we can expand to these other areas and not worry about, we didn't cover that before we went all the way out there.
And so that would be the first kind of step in this process, is that you really do need to sit down and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the rules, structures, standards that you have in place in your relationship right now. If there's any confusion, you need to talk through those points of confusion. If there's anything that needs to be expanded, you need to talk through the points of expansion that you need to open up. For me, as a taken in hand, I had this idea and this concept that there were certain things that were kind of unspoken expectations. And when I realized that, at least for my head of household, we couldn't have unspoken expectations. Everything needed to be spoken.
That's true.
Because if they were left unspoken, then he had confusion. He was unsure of if I was okay relinquishing that piece of our relationship. He was unsure of, he knew he had authority in the relationship, but he was unsure of how far that authority reached. Now, once we had this conversation, I think that he understands that now. I think he understands that even if we haven't talked about something, he does have the authority to step in, even in those unspoken areas, because we talked about that too,
yes.
Where I've very explicitly told him, like, you have authority in every area of my life and in every area of our relationship. You don't have to wait until it's a conversation. You can step in and you can offer that authority. You can offer that guidance, even in those areas that haven't been spoken about, because as much as you want to discuss things, as many conversations as you have, you're never going to be able to talk through every single situation that you're going to come across. So you kind of have to talk in broad terms and try to narrow it as much as you can at the same time. And I know that sounds like something that is really difficult to do, but what I mean by that is say, hey, you have authority to step in. If you think that, for instance, if you feel like something that I've done or said is disrespectful, you have the authority to step in and call me out on that, offer consequences, even if it's something that we've never talked about. But the things that we have talked about, the things that we have incurred, let's go through that and let's talk through maybe ways to make that accountability more predictable and the punishments more effective in those spaces.
And when she's saying that we needed to go through all that kind of stuff, many of you may be going, it seemed like you guys had already kind of done that. We did, but we really had to think about, really almost think about, try to cover every area of our relationship. And I know that sounds daunting, but not as long as you would think. But there were just certain areas where we had thought, I thought we had discussed that, or I thought that that was an area that I had a say over. And so we just needed to have clarity in some of these areas. I know, especially that I did as the head of household, to kind of clarify, well, I know I'm in charge of that, but am I really? And again, as she said, really clarify those areas and then realize, oh, okay, what we're doing now, what we're putting on the table, the cards that we're putting on the table is we're going to take all of the mystery out of the other stuff that we had been talking about and allow the things that we're practicing in domestic discipline relationship to take fruition in those places, so that I have authority over those areas and I can make the call on whether or not there needs to be a punishment, a correction, whatever that needs to happen in those areas. And I think that was very, very key in helping us get to just the next step and get rid of some of those irritations that we were talking about.
We talked, I can't remember now, it's been several weeks ago, about how I kind of sat down for Coda just for communication purposes, wrote out what I believe he expects from me in our relationship. And I think that was a very eye-opening experience, because it really helped him see how I view his authority in every aspect of our relationship, and what I feel like that breaks down to in just the micro level of our interactions. And it really empowered him to look at and say, okay, so if you get a little short with me, I should call you out on that.
Right.
And I think that really helped us be able to develop a stricter system of just authority and accountability. Now, that's not to say that he punishes me every time I get a little short with him, but at the very least, he will call me out on it and perhaps even step in with correction or punishment if that is warranted. Because sometimes my getting a little short is a little bit more disrespectful than what it should be, and punishment would be warranted in those situations. But most of the time, it's just him saying, hey, you need to watch your tone right now. And that's enough to get me to course correct.
Yeah, and as she was talking about, one of the things that we did that may not seem like a very rigid thing to do, but it was taking away a lot of we had almost too much information under what was a correction and what was a punishment and what that needed to be, how that needed to be dealt with. So we took a lot of that away and made it to where I have more of a say of what constitutes a correction, or as she just said, depending on how she responds, I can say, well, you know what? I think the way she responded does constitute a punishment because it went way beyond the boundary of where I wanted it to be. Or, you know what? I'm just going to make a correction here and give a warning to say, I corrected you this time, but if you go further or you even have this same infraction the next time, it is going to be a punishment. And that actually really helped us by taking away less detail in that area. Where we're talking about adding detail in other areas, it was better to take away, I think, in that area. Wouldn't you say?
I think that the biggest thing for me in this process was stepping back and letting Coda make those decisions completely within his authority as the head of household. I think that at the beginning of our relationship, I brought domestic discipline to Coda. I had more of the understanding of what these things meant and what they should look like, because I had been doing years of research at that point, and it was a brand new concept to him.
Yeah.
And so naturally, I was trying to share all the information that I had with him and share these concepts with him. And he just needed more of that information from me. And at this point, I need to step back because he has the information. And so for me to say, I don't need to be involved in deciding what's a punishment, what's a correction, and what's a verbal warning, and where all those lines are, he gets to decide in the moment, basically, where he feels that should happen. Now, there are some things that, obviously would be, I would be shocked if they weren't automatic punishments. I'll
Right.
put it that way.
Sure.
But it's still his decision. And unless I really feel like something is going outside the bounds of what's reasonable, or if I feel that he's letting me just get away with way too much, it's not my place to insert myself into that decision making anymore. And that is one thing that I think really helped us become more rigid in the expectations and in the structure, is that Coda is really owning his position as the head of household
That's a good
and
word.
making those decisions.
That's a good word. Yeah, that is, I think you hit the nail right on the head, is that I'm really able to grow into my position a lot more and take more of that leadership role, because she's decided to step back and have that idea of, he's got it. I need to step back for the sake of our relationship, and I need to step back because it's the right thing to do in order to help him lead. And so maybe some of you, as you're listening to this podcast, you're going, "Oh my goodness, this is exactly where our relationship is." And so just this quick piece of advice, head of households, you need to step it up a little bit and say, you know what, I feel like, I know I'm not perfect, but I feel like I have enough experience now. I can take more of that leadership role, and I need to make sure that I'm taking that next step and taking in hands. You need to step back a little bit and say, I'm going to let my head of household do what he has already shown that he's capable of doing and will do. And does that mean he's going to be perfect? No, but I need to support him in that. And both of those are scary, and they're going to take time, and they're going to take effort. But you can do it. And it will help your relationship. But that has been really key for us to really embrace more of the positions that we are currently in, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I think that another way that has been really good for us is that beyond domestic discipline, beyond talking about the rules and structures and the expectations, we have really delved into getting to know who each other are on a personal level. That sounds really weird, especially
it can be. I mean,
especially for a couple that's been married as long as we have. We're coming up on 17 years of marriage. We've been together for 20. It sounds really weird that we would need to learn more about each other just as a couple. But really that has helped, because I think that one of the big reasons why Coda feels empowered to make these decisions is because he knows what is and is not fair to me, because he knows my motivations. He knows my thought processes. He knows what I struggle with and what I don't struggle with. And by knowing all of those things, he's able to make better determinations. So I don't feel like he's becoming just unreasonable. I know that sometimes on the surface it can be like, he punished you for that. That's ridiculous. But because I know him and I know his values and his character, I know that I'm not necessarily getting punished for what it seems like I am. It always goes deeper. Mm-hmm. There's always a bigger implication than the behavior or action that I'm actually being punished for. It's more of the underlying principle of the matter. And I know that that's what he is really valuing, and that's what he's driving home.
You brought up a really good point there that is in fact good. And that is something that's going to, in our relationship, that may be strange to another relationship. And so what I mean by that is, she just said, there may be something that I punish her for that someone, even that's in a domestic discipline relationship, would go, well, we would never do that in our relationship. Well, we've talked about that many, many times, that your relationship is very unique. And so our relationship in domestic discipline is going to look different than yours. And so what that means, head of households, for you, especially, is exactly what Arya just said, is that you have to really put in a lot of time and effort and continue every single day to learn more about her and learn about her strengths and her weaknesses, because there are areas where you're taken in hand may not struggle in the same areas that Arya does, and vice versa. And so again, that's unique to her and your relationship. And so you really want to take time and think about, okay, where are the areas that I really do need to hold her to a punishment in these areas if she slips, because these are very, very very weak areas that she needs a lot of help in. And then maybe the areas that you just do corrections for are areas where you're like, well, she's getting a little better there. So maybe I don't need to do a full-blown punishment in these areas, but I need to use correction. And of course, those can change based on things that happen daily, things that happen over a course of many, many months. But really take the time and think about and study her from the standpoint of really trying to figure out what you can do in your relationship to help her, where her strengths and weaknesses are, because it's going to be different for every single one.
Well, and I think that it's appropriate to say that if I am more intentional in my misbehavior, that's going to result in punishment, maybe
Very
even
true.
more severe punishment than if I'm just being a little bit more forgetful
Right.
of our structures and routines. That might be a correction the first time. I mean, and I'm expected to remember and be more mindful beyond
The
that.
next time.
It's almost like a give and take. In this relationship, you each have needs, you each have wants, you each have things that you really need this structure and domestic discipline to support, right? And so when we're talking about rules and structures, there are going to be things that Coda places a lot of value on. We have talked about that in our own relationship. And if you don't know what your head of household's like values are for you and what they want from you as a taken in hand, ask them. Like, you have to know that. You have to know what their priority is. And so those things that he holds in higher priority are going to result in more punishment than correction, because he really wants to develop those habits, develop those characters, qualities. He really wants to develop that in me and see his priorities being met. On the flip side, of your head of household, you have to know what your taken in hand needs from that structure, because there's going to be things that I do that it's not necessarily priority for me, but it's what I feel more guilty about. It's the things that I know are so wrong and so detrimental to our relationship that I just feel so broken up about. And I need those things to be met with stricter accountability and more punishment than correction, just because to relieve my own guilt and to make me feel more rectified in my relationship and make me feel the forgiveness that I am wanting from that, and make me feel like those things are not being allowed to continue to cause dissension and in our dynamic.
Yeah, and the key piece that she's saying there is that this is the part that we were talking about earlier that sometimes is going to need to involve a conversation, because there may be some things as the head of household that you realize, oh, I didn't realize that she struggled with X as much as she does. And so the reason we were having this disconnect, the reason we were having just maybe a little bit of, again, an irritation in our relationship was I wasn't punishing that area severely enough, and she was broken up about it. She was still feeling guilty about it, and so she needed me to step in and make a better decision there. And that only can come with that conversation that we were talking about, to really talk to each other and find out from her, wow, okay, these are areas, again, that I did not realize she needed a lot more correction there. And then the other side is true too. Maybe you've been very, very harsh in an area where she's like, I really do have that. I really feel like I've got a lid on that. And so the last time you punished me with that, it was the opposite reaction. I felt really bad because I thought, man, I thought I had actually done really well in that area.
However, I will say that if you want to uphold a strict standard and you want to come down with punishment, and your taken in hand is feeling a disconnect from that process, they're thinking that you're being unreasonable, you need to be able to communicate to them why. Yes. Why are you upholding this to that level of strictness? And so you really want to For instance, something that I don't view as that big of a deal is if I intend to do the laundry on Thursday and I don't get it done until Friday or Saturday, as long as Coda doesn't actually run out of clothing, I don't view it as that big of a deal. But if he did, then he needs to be able to communicate to me why that is a priority for him, that I get it done on the day that I set. It could be as simple as, I expect you to have integrity and uphold your responsibilities, and it was really irresponsible for you to put that off. And that can be enough to say that it warrants punishment rather than correction.
Yes, and so, but the key piece of advice there is that that's why you want to have these conversations. It's not wrong to hold that standard, and that's exactly what Arya is saying, but you got to make sure that is very, very clear to both of you, so that she doesn't especially feel like, wow, why am I being punished for this? I was able to get it done before he ran out of clothes, but she needs to know that that's a standard that you uphold, that you want upheld.
Well, and to use that example, like if I were to push the laundry off till Friday or Saturday, and Coda were to say, hey, why didn't you get this done? And I told him, well, I thought I could do it. And I would expect him to, at the very least, say, you didn't ask my permission to push that off. You're going to get a correction for that because you acted outside of the bounds of my authority there. But if he were to come in and be like, hey, why didn't you get this done? And I were to flippantly say, I thought I could just push it off, and that was something that he held very highly, I would accept him coming in and saying, that was extremely irresponsible of you. I expect you to do things when you say you're going to do them, so I am going to punish you for that. I would accept that, but again, after you have that conversation, to know, is fulfilling your responsibilities a high priority for your head of household?
Right.
And if you know that, then you should act accordingly and not push things off without thinking about it.
So I would say that the two big key takeaways from what we were just talking about is have conversations, and number two, don't make any assumptions. Assumptions are bad. The conversations will help you not have assumptions.
But what I was going to say, though, is even if it's not a big deal to you, let's say, again, the laundry situation, I'm using that because it's not a big deal to either of us.
No, it's a good one to use. It's a good example to use.
Because as long as he has clean clothes in his closet, he's okay.
Yep.
But even if it's not a big deal, even if it's something that I'm like, I can wait, and he's like, yeah, I have clothes, it's no big deal, I still think that you need to offer correction if that communication is not had, because it is still a standard, it is still a rule, it is still an expectation. And if I guess, like for my relationship right now, I just need to understand that I am acting under the authority of my head of household. And if I act outside of that authority, then I expect correction to bring me back in. Unless it's something that goes way outside the bounds of acceptable, and then that's when punishment comes in. And that's how we've maintained keeping things reasonable for our relationship. And again, this is going to look so different for everybody, because you may want to have very, very strict parameters around what is and is not acceptable. You may want to know that accountability is going to be there for every detail. Or you may find more comfort in, having more room to kind of roam in that space. So you really want to look at, what are the needs of your relationship? What are the needs of the head of household? What are the needs of the taken in hand? And create structures and boundaries that honor all of those things.
I really don't have anything to add. I think that was really, really good. But I mean, to really just sum it all up is, don't be afraid to get very, very detailed and very rigid in your relationship, because you're going to find the benefits far outweigh the downside.
Absolutely. So. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for joining us.